Two Hastings families forced out of their homes are frustrated they still don't know when they'll be able to return 3 weeks after they had to leave due to asbestos contamination. Anthony Manley and his family were told to pack their bags and get out after WorkSafe issued a prohibition notice on his rental property after testing identified asbestos there. He says that was the day after a contractor hired by his landlord for a paint job water blasted the roof. His family of 5 have been in limbo ever since, and the contamination has forced out others in the neighbourhood too. The real barrier between the Manleys and their home is far more subtle than the monstrous fence around it. Tiny but toxic asbestos particles.
Makes you want to cry.
Beyond the safety fence and the warning sign, there's not a blade of exposed grass at the house the Manleys rent with their young children. The lawn is essentially cling-wrapped in a black polythene to stop the layer of asbestos dust, the contamination, wafting even further.
More than a bomb site. Worse than a bomb site. If you can just look behind me, the hole was completely covered with paint, dust. There was just water everywhere. It was everywhere, all around the section, all on the kids' equipment, just completely covered.
The trouble started just over 3 weeks ago. Anthony says a contractor turned up to paint the roof, knowing full well it could contain asbestos.
My wife actually went out there and asked him, is it safe? Is it going to be okay with my kids running around and playing? He said, that's perfectly fine. Everything's fine. He's not cutting into it. But blow me days, he's water blasting it.
Next minute, WorkSafe shuts down the site after a complaint and positive asbestos tests.
The testers came through and it's actually in the roof cavity itself. All the carpet has to be taken up, all our beddings has to be done, everything inside is contaminated. We can only keep the hard surface stuff, but everything else has to go.
Everything else has to go?
The kids' teddy bears, their favourite teddy bear, we might be able to keep 1 or 2. But we just had to wash it down thoroughly.
And yet more bad news, the order to vacate immediately.
Kitty. Jeffrey.
Those with more lives to spare had to be left behind. Anthony comes by daily to feed the cats. The family was in a hotel for 2 weeks at their landlord's expense. It's book a batch now and another house from Friday. It's stressful, especially for the kids, including the Manley's 10-year-old son, who has severe behavioural problems.
His anxiety levels is going through the roof. This is not good for him. I've got a 4-year-old daughter. She nearly made me cry yesterday when she said, Daddy, I want to go home. For a 4-year-old girl to say, Daddy, I want to go home, that's really heartbreaking because you know you've got a home and you can't take your kids there.
Like trouble, asbestos can spread, and it has, over the hedge and fence to Abby Hillman's place, a Housing New Zealand rental. She says Housing New Zealand took 2 days to turn up after she called.
That afternoon she turned up at about 4 o'clock with $200 gift voucher for Pick and Save and a $200 gift vouchers, and pretty much told me I had to get out of that house today. She couldn't find us any accommodation in Hawke's Bay, so we were given an opportunity of finding somewhere else we would like to go, and we did say Whakatane because we have family there.
House hopping meant the children missed the first week of school.
It was pretty stressful because, you know, we're a family of 8. We can't just really turn up on someone's doorstep and be like, hey, can you take us in for the weekend? It's like a lot of planning for that.
Abby's pregnant and her son has a serious medical condition affecting his hearing, eyesight and kidneys. She's worried her house isn't safe. Testers were there last week.
I met with the tester who Housing New Zealand have obviously hired to do the testing. And I asked him, I was like, so is this property safe? And he said, no. And I go, well, would you let your family live here? And he said, definitely not.
The testers are back at Abby's again today. The results not yet known. On the other side of the fence, Anthony and his family, well, they're circling.
Curtains haven't been open in 3 weeks. Heaps of rubbish everywhere, all that black polythene. Just looks abandoned.
Future unknown. Checkpoint contacted the contractor, who told us he wouldn't be making any comment. WorkSafe has confirmed that it issued a prohibition notice on the site, stopping any work which can't resume until all asbestos has been removed. And in a statement it says it's working with the local councils and the DHB to ensure the asbestos is properly removed and the property is safe. It says it's completed its initial inquiries but won't be investigating any further. We've also just had a statement from Housing New Zealand, who says that it went to the tenant's property on the 23rd of January. 2 days later, when they received the results of the asbestos testing, they notified the tenants to move out. They said that they helped them with alternative accommodation, which the tenants accepted. They did subsequent testing and still found asbestos on a portion of land. They were told the house was habitable, but out of caution for their tenants' health and safety, they continued to provide alternative accommodation. There's more tests happening today, Housing New Zealand says, and they're following the correct procedure with an asbestos specialist working to remove the danger from the site. And they apologise for any inconvenience caused to the tenants and say they'll have it sorted as soon as possible.